Welcome to the Friendship Sermon Podcast. Friendship exists to bring people to Jesus and to develop them into fully mature, reproducing followers. Gather to worship with us Sundays at 9 or 10:45, or visit us online at fcbc.church.
There is none like you among the gods, O Lord, nor are there any works like yours. All the nations you have made shall come and worship before you, O Lord, and shall glorify your name. For you are great and do wondrous things. You alone are God. Teach us your way, O Lord, that we may walk in your truth and unite our hearts to fear your name. It is in the name of your Son that we ask that. Guide us into understandings. Open our hearts and minds to receive your truth and protect us from the evil one. It's in his name and for your glory that we pray. Amen. We are closing our series on suffering, and there is a lot of suffering that does go on in our country. In fact, if you don't know, there is about just under 2,000 cases of death due to child abuse and neglect in the U.S. every year. And it's been that way between 1,500 to 2,000 for decades now. Almost every year that happens. And those kind of things can make us question, where is God? And the more personal a story gets, that you have a connection to them or you know about them, it becomes a lot more emotionally heart-wrenching. I mean, people ask, where is God when this goes on? And what do you answer them when you say, where is God when this 4-year-old boy gets punched in the mouth because he tracked mud in the carpet? Like, where is God when these kind of things that seemingly should never happen go on? Does he disappear? Is he gone in that moment? Is it when we come in and we find ourselves in a meeting with the doctor, and he comes in, he shuts the door, and he's got his report, is about to give you the news that you know is unsettling? Those questions can come in our minds at times going, where is God in that moment? Again, the more personal this becomes, the harder that becomes the question, to be able to answer that question. And so I'm going to give us some categories to look at of why suffering happens. And the first one's pretty easy. The first one is because of my own sin. I mean, if I do something and I make wrong decisions, there are going to be consequences. I mean, there are people that for decades would smoke 4 packs a day, and then they're surprised 30 years later when lung cancer comes up. Like, our decisions are going to have consequences one way or another, good or bad, whatever we do. But when our own sin and bad choices come, we're going to face suffering. But there's also the suffering that we face because of someone else's sin, someone else's poor decisions. How many times have you read a story or seen a news article where there is a drunk driver who's ran into another car and the person who is inebriated can walk away, but that person that was in the other car, there's a greater injury or sometimes worse. What did they do? Nothing. It's someone else's decision has caused that, has caused suffering to come upon them. And then there's a much broader category. Just because the idea of sin has entered our world is fallen and broken, and creation longs to be redeemed, and there's just a general sense of fallenness that suffering is going to happen, and it may not be a result of some sin you may have committed today or chosen, or someone else right around you, but just the result of a fallen world. But what I hope to do this morning through our passage is give you a fourth category, a fourth bucket, if you will. And to do that, we're going to look at an event that happened with Martha and her sister Mary and their brother Lazarus. And as you heard from the scripture reading, we know that their brother Lazarus had become ill. We don't know with what. We don't know what he was ill with, what he came down with. We just know he got sick. And we also know that they were really close and friends with Jesus. Now, that seemed like a pretty amazing thing because up until this time, Jesus had been doing some pretty amazing things. I mean, first he takes this water and he turns it into wine that all the snobs in Napa Valley would freak out about because it was so amazing. Like, he was able to do this miracle that no one saw coming. He was able to take somebody who had been born blind and helps make them see. He was able to make lame people walk. He's been doing some pretty amazing miracles, even taking fish and bread and feeding thousands and thousands of people. And so they send a messenger to Jesus about their brother Lazarus going, hey, he's sick, can you do something? And they don't even send the messenger to go, hey, tell him Lazarus is sick. The message realizes how close they were. The message says, hey, tell him the one you love is sick. Like, no names are needed. This message came from Mary and Martha. He's going to know exactly who it is. There's a connection there. There's a closeness. This isn't like on the periphery of life. They're close and connected in their relationship. And let's pick up in that in John 11, and we're going to pick up in verse 5. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So John wants you to make sure you understand. This is just not on the outskirts. These are people that are really connected. They love one another. So now that Jesus loved Mary and Martha and her sister Lazarus, verse 6, so almost like this is a following as a result of that. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. That's not what I expect to read as a result of loving somebody. Like, I get a message that they're sick. My first response would be what? I should go or find out what I can do or help. And Jesus' first response is, I'm going to stay around 2 more days. Now, if you know the story, you kind of know what happens immediately next, pretty soon here. Lazarus doesn't get better, does he? Lazarus' illness, he succumbs to it, and he dies. And upon dying, he gets buried shortly after that. And Jesus is hanging around somewhere far away, that's about 22 miles away, 2 more days upon his sickness. And so Lazarus becomes dead and buried. Let's continue looking at the story in John 11. Let's skip to verse 20. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God's going to give you. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Listen to Martha's response. Martha said to him, I know. He's going to rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives, believes in me, shall never die. Do you believe this? And she said to him, yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who's coming into the world. It's almost like this. When Jesus approaches, Martha's like, where were you? Like, what's taken so long? And Jesus starts going, well, you know who I am, right? I was like, yeah, I don't doubt. I know you're the Son of God. And they get in this theological discussion, it feels like. And Martha's like, I don't need a theology lesson right now. Like, I get the resurrection. I get that there's an afterlife. I get that you're the Son of God. But where were you? And so she goes and tells Mary, and let's pick that up in verse 28. When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing she is going to the tomb to weep there. So she's in the room. Martha comes up and whispers something to Mary. Mary juts out of the house, and the people that are there, because of the mourning that's going on, because of the loss of Lazarus, they're like, emotion has struck her. She's going out to the tomb. We need to be there to help support her. Verse 32, now when Martha came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. And so the Jews said, see how he loved him? And then the thought that would be going through my mind went through many of their minds in verse 37. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying? Look at the two responses we see in those two verses, both from Mary and from Martha. Look at Martha's first. When she first sees them, what does she say? Martha said to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And then we see the exact same response from Mary just a few verses later. And what does she write? Mary, falling at his feet, said to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Now, that question sounds very accusatory, very like, where were you? Like, obviously, you loved Lazarus. So what are you doing staying 2 more days away? Now, what is that question they're doing? It's probably not a question of accusation. And I'll tell you 2 reasons why I believe that. One, Jesus was their rabbi, and these were first century women. In the first century, what are the odds that a first century woman is going to publicly rebuke her rabbi? Slim to none. But more importantly, there's also the timing of the situation. I want you to think about this. So they're in the town of Bethany, the family is, where Lazarus gets sick and he's died and becomes buried. And that town is about 2 miles from Jerusalem. And where Jesus is at, he's where John the Baptist had been baptizing people. And so we know from John 1 and John 10, he is about 20 miles from Jerusalem after crossing the Jordan River. So what's the order of events that happen? Lazarus gets sick, and they send a messenger saying, hey, the Lord, the one you love, he's sick. And so they sent the messenger. In first century travel, going Jordan River, 2 miles to Jerusalem, 20 miles on the other side of that, how long do you think that's going to take? We're actually about a day trip for the messenger. Now, do you know what it tells me is? It takes a day for him to reach Jesus. What does Jesus do? Stays 2 more days. And then he's got to travel back the same passage, also with about a 2,000 foot incline going up to Jerusalem. So it's going to take him a day as well. That's how many days? 4. Do you know how long Lazarus was in the tomb for? 4 days when Jesus arrived. You know what that tells me? The moment they sent the messenger, the minute he turns the corner, crests the hill, gets out of sight, Lazarus died. Had Jesus dropped everything the moment the messenger came and made it straight back to Jerusalem, Jesus would have still been 2 days late. But now he shows up on day 4. Why? That question that's rolling around in Mary and Martha's mind, it's probably a lot like an emotional question that we would feel. Not always one of accusation, but of, God, I'm experiencing something. Where are you in this? It's the kind of question that rolls around when maybe you find out, like, your parent has gotten Alzheimer's. Or maybe a significant other just dumped you out of the blue. And you feel with that gut check. You just got a punch right in your gut, like the wind's taken out of you. And that moment where you feel like all your dreams have just kind of vanished. You had all these hopes and plans for the future, and something came in, and it's like it's gone. It's taken away, and we're like, God, where were you? A doctor who comes in and gives us that diagnosis. God, if you'd have been here, that diagnosis might have been different. Like, my career might have been different. My marriage might have been different. My job may have been different. Where were you? And we feel those questions sometimes when suffering comes. When Cassie and I were first married, we lived in the Quad Cities, which is right on the Mississippi River border between Illinois and Iowa, which is very much known as farm country. In fact, the townhome that we lived in, the back part of my neighborhood went right into the John Deere World Headquarters. So there's a few big green tractors around, these giant cornfields that are around. You would even see them driving down the street, which was really different for me, coming from Georgia to there, and all of a sudden I'm passing tractors on the side of the road. It's a little unusual. But one of the farmers that we knew in our church, he had something go wrong with his John Deere tractor. I probably shouldn't say that online. John Deere might not like this thing, but something happened with the tractor. And so there was a problem with the engine. It like caught fire, frizzed out, can't use the tractor anymore, okay? So now we've taken away the livelihood, and they estimate that's going to be around $80,000 to fix. That's 20 years ago. I have no idea what it would be today, but that's a lot of money today. Think what it was 20 years ago, $80,000 to fix. And so he takes it, has it looked at, and when it comes due, do you know how much he actually had to end up paying in the end? $0. Because it was under warranty. You know what a warranty is, right? Like if you get a product or service and it doesn't perform like it's supposed to and something goes wrong with it, we just send it back to the manufacturer and they're like, we'll either fix it for free or we'll give you another one. It's all covered. You know what the problem is? I think too many of us think that God's got some sort of cosmic warranty on life. And anytime we get the wind knocked out of us, anytime something bad happens, anytime we get a bad report, anytime we get something that we don't like, we want to take our life, wrap it back up, and ship it back to the manufacturer and say, here, fix it. God, I'm not supposed to experience this pain. I'm not supposed to experience this trauma, this suffering. So I want you to take it back and fix it. And if God decides not to fix it, then it sounds like he doesn't care about me. You know what? If God doesn't care about me, then I guess I don't care about God. And somehow we think he's got this warranty that whenever something hits us wrong, we should be able to exchange that. I don't know why cancer hits some families and not others. I don't know why certain suffering hits ones and not others. But convincing yourself that it's God's fault will not bring you one step closer to resolution, and it will not bring you one step closer to feeling comfort. So why the 2 days? And Jesus got the message. Why did he hang out where he was 2 more days? Let's look. In John 11, we're going to back up to verse 17. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. There's your 4 days. The messenger 1 day, Jesus waited 2 days, Jesus returns. He's there on the 4th day. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. Now what happens in the 2 days where Jesus waits? Bethany, 2 miles away from Jerusalem. When Lazarus dies and they buried him on day 1, we have 2 extra days going on with what? These people that are mourning come from Jerusalem and they're traveling 2 miles to the place of Bethany so that they can be with the family during this time of mourning. Now there are eyewitnesses on the scene. Now the stage is set for what's about to happen and what comes next. Skip with me to verse 38, still in John 11. Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. And Jesus said, take away the stone. This verse, I actually love this verse in the King James. I grew up with the King James, and this is the one verse I really love in the King James. Because it says, but Martha said, but Lord, he stinketh. It's been 4 days. Martha, the sister of the dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there is an odor, for he has been dead 4 days. And Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? And so they took away the stone. And Jesus, lifting up his eyes, said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you have always heard me, but I say this on the account of all the people standing around, that they may believe that you, the Father, sent me, the Son, so that they would know that I'm coming from you, Father, and that he sent me for this. When he had said these things, he cried out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The man who had died came out, his hands and his feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped in a cloth. And Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. There was a crowd that had gathered to show that he is the Son of God. There were witnesses there now that grew. It wasn't just a little family mourning now. It was a large group of people who was able to see what God could do. But there's actually a little bit more unsettling way that this is said, I think, why he waits 2 days. And it's actually a few verses before that. If you would, look at verse 11. So Jesus, after he gets the message, he starts having this conversation with the disciples, and they're not understanding what he's saying. But he said, after saying these things, he said to them, in verse 11, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going to go wake him." And most of us will go, well, when you're sick, yeah, it's good to sleep. You'll get well, you'll recover. And that's the disciples' thought in verse 12. The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he had fallen asleep, he's going to recover." Verse 13. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he had meant taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead." And here's the verse. "And for your sake, I'm glad that I was not there so that you would believe." Now, this is an interesting connection. Think about this. What is the connection between Lazarus' illness, his death, and the disciples? Some of the disciples probably knew Lazarus. I don't know that all 12 were really close to him the way Jesus was close to that family. And so you have some guys on the periphery in the disciples. So you have Lazarus' illness, his death, and the disciples' faith talked about in these verses. The connection. Lazarus' illness and death was for the disciples, for their faith to grow. The implication here is Jesus cares more about our faith than he does about someone's health. Let me say it a different way. Your faith is more important than your child's health in the scheme of priorities. God cares more about your faith being in him than he does that someone feels healthy. Lazarus' illness and death was there, and Jesus waits 2 days, and he tells the disciples, "I'm glad I was not there. I'm glad I wasn't there when the illness was there and I could heal them." Lazarus did not have a peaceful death, my assumption, reading these verses. My guess, when an illness lends to death, that there's suffering involved. And in that suffering, Jesus looks to his disciples and goes, "I'm glad I wasn't there to heal that." Not because I don't care about Lazarus. John was very clear in the early verses. Jesus very much loves Lazarus. But when he was ranking of what's more important, he was saying their faith is more important. And that gives us our fourth category. See, our fourth, one of the reasons, and it's not that there's not more, you can probably come up with 6, but one of the reasons that we go through suffering is to grow our faith. And I'm not going to answer every question you have about evil and suffering this morning. There's probably too many. But I know that suffering does grow our faith. But here's the interesting part. Sometimes our suffering helps grow the faith of other people, and they may not even be the ones close to us. Not all those disciples were tied close to that relationship with Lazarus. Some of your suffering may not be just to grow your faith or even grow your immediate family's faith. It might be to grow someone else's faith that's just on the periphery in your life. And so the question, if God uses suffering to grow people's faith, what should our response be to that? That's not an easy response. It's not a happy response. In fact, that wasn't even Jesus' emotion in this story. What happened when Jesus came? He cried. He wept. That's going to be an impact of going through suffering. But what happens after that? most of us, when we are in the midst of suffering, I think our response becomes anger. God, why would you let this happen? Despair. Is this ever going to end? Hopelessness. We have all of these negative emotions that come in suffering. And there are times, not every time you suffer, but there are times that we go through suffering just so it would build our faith or the faith of others around us. So how do we respond? How should we respond? Yes, we could be sad. But is there a hope in that sadness? Is there a yearning that there is something more after that point? Or are we just mad with God? In a moment, we're going to have a chance to respond through Lord's Supper. And in very much the same way, Jesus had that choice. There was choose suffering so that someone else's faith can grow. And yes, on the eve of the cross, there was an emotional outpouring from Jesus as he prayed. And remember what he prayed? God, if there is any other way, let's take it. I'm for it. Can this cup pass? But not my will, your will. And our response in taking this is to put our faith in him and choose sometimes to accept suffering in order to grow the faith of us or others around us.